Hey, I'm Chris from Make Everything, and today I'm going to show you how to make these simple 30-inch round wooden tabletops. Check it out. Alright, this is a really simple project that I'm going to be using very basic and very inexpensive material that I'm getting from Home Depot. They sell what is called a bandsawed pine, which is a rough sawn white pine, and these are a 1x4 by 12 foot long piece. So I'm going to need 8 pieces to build the 30-inch tabletop that I am going for. I make a lot of these for a local company, and in this set I made 16, which was not a huge deal. They're basically just going to be glued together. I'm not going to use biscuits because they're going to get a strap on the back side in 2 directions with screws and glue, and that'll help keep them together. And I'm just making sure that I apply a liberal amount of glue to the sides of each board. And before I got to this point, I made sure that I laid them out in a way that allowed them to sit tightly against each other. You want to make sure when you select boards for a project like this, since they're rough sawn, that you select stuff that's relatively straight unless you have a joiner. I do, but in order to keep this project simple, I decided to not use the joiner and just lay them out and clamp them together tight. I'm using like an inexpensive clamp from Harbor Freight, and then by using a 2x4 on the top, that allows me to account for any warp that happens when I put that pressure on all those boards. Now I'm kind of applying a medium amount of pressure, getting the 2x4s in place to keep everything flat, and then sort of going back and readjusting all the clamps to get them super tight. And what I'm going for here is a good amount of squeeze out, and I'm using a flooring mallet to bang the pieces down in case any of them are starting to pop up from the pressure by the clamps.
The next day,
I give that stuff 24 hours to dry. I'm using a Type-On 2 adhesive, and then take the clamps off, and I wind up with a nice 6 foot long, 30-inch wide panel that I can make 2 tabletops out of. Okay, so here we've got pretty much the simplest circle jig you can have. This is just a piece of plywood with a little spacer so that the pencil is held up straight. I've got a miscellaneous ice pick, and I'm just gonna go with 30 inches because that's the diameter of the tables. Now I'm kind of looking for choice material, and I know that this center of that board is where I want to be, so I'll stick that in there and just trace out my circle. Now, tracing out the circle for me isn't totally necessary because I am going to cut these on the bandsaw, but if you were cutting these with a jigsaw, the circle is important. And what's good about tracing out the circle and knowing where my tabletops are going to lay out is I can attach my support bars to the back in advance. So I know exactly where the tabletop is going to lay out on the material, make sure that I get into a nice area with minimal gaps, and then I can head over to the table saw and cut the support bar material. Now this is just 3/4 inch plywood, and this is going to go on the back of these tables in a T shape, and they're going to add support, and then these tables are going to go on top of whiskey barrels. So having them with these little X's on the back, it'll keep them retained inside the top of the whiskey barrel. It's important that these X's be the same length in both directions, so I just do a little bit of math to get the difference away in the opposite direction of the long support bar and make sure that I have 20 inches overall in both ways. Now again, I'm just going to be using glue and screws to attach the support bars, and on this particular type of bandsaw pine, the back is extremely rough. It has like a ribbed sort of texture, so it's easy enough to know what is the front and what is the back, but you'd want to make sure that you put the nice side up and attach these bars to the back side. You notice I drilled a little tiny hole there too, and that's going to be for my circle cutting jig. Alright, so this circle cutting jig is super simple. This is just a piece of wood. I have a wooden tabletop on my bandsaw, but if you had a metal tabletop, you could do this with clamps over here. And all I have is a 3/4 inch spacer to supplement for those support bars that I just put on the bottom of the tops. So I have 15 inches to the center of what is just a drywall screw sticking up through the bottom, and that's it. This is all going to get sanded, so I'm not super worried about getting crazy with the circle being totally accurate, but my blade is pretty tight and my guides are down pretty low, so I should get a really, really tight circle. You can easily adapt a circle cutting jig like this to work on a variety of different types of bandsaws, or you could easily do this with a router or a jigsaw. A bandsaw for me just happens to be the fastest method that I'm the most comfortable with. So I basically just lay that on there and spin it around on that drywall screw, and I get a really nice circular cut. Now for the sanding process of this, because they are pretty rough sawn and I don't spend too much time lining up the boards, I start with an 80 grit on the belt sander and I just work into it pretty aggressively to get that whole thing sort of planed down to a consistent flatness, and then I head over with the random orbital sander and I sand it up to a 180 grit with the orbital sander. Now what that's going to give me is a really nice smooth finish, but it's also going to leave some of those imperfections and those sort of waves in it. And now these are supposed to be a rustic style table, so I don't want to make them perfect. Also, I don't have a huge amount of time to make these and I want to keep them simple. So I'm using a dark walnut stain, and I stain around the perimeter of the bottom, and I make sure to cover the stain on the top really well. And I'm using a lamb's wool flooring stain applicator to apply my stain, which just gives you a really nice even coat really quickly, especially when you have to make a lot of something like this. And then I'll go back with a polycrylic, a Minwax polycrylic, which is a water-based polyurethane, and I'll apply 2 or 3 coats with a brush, and that will level out and give a really nice sort of semi-gloss look that'll last for a long time. You want to definitely make sure you get it soaked in the ends, and that is it. These things are super easy to make, and like I said, I've made a lot of them, so I feel like I can stand behind that. And yeah, very scalable as well. You can make these in any size. All right, that about does it for this video. Like I said, these things are super simple, easy to make, and I've made a lot of them. They're very easily repeatable. You could scale this size to whatever you want. The bandsawed pine looks really nice. It has that rough sawn look, but it's also smooth enough that you can use these for food or whatever. And like I said in the video, you don't need a bandsaw to do these. You could easily cut the circle with a jigsaw or a router and then refine it with sandpaper. So again, really easy project, and I hope that it's helpful to you, the information that I gave. If you have any questions, leave them down below. I'll be happy to answer them. And if you want to see behind the scenes stuff, I posted about these on my Instagram a lot while I was making them. Follow me at Make Everything Shop. Again, I'm Chris Epp from Make Everything. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope to see you on the next video. Thanks.